I told him that if I had known he was so funny, I would have come for the devotion. But instead, I was preparing this talk.
Got a time for commercial. Time for a commercial between Margaret and Doug. There's a Nebraska football game.
Oh, Michael will be leaving at 11 to watch the Nebraska football game. If anybody needs to do that, you're welcome to leave with him. At 11, you have 30, 25 minutes.
What he said.
I knew in my life before I met Jack Doherty. Thank you for inviting us to speak. Sometimes I thought we'd just run out of imagination to keep asking us, but we love it. Jabas and I just live for this sort of thing. This is a room full of teachers and preachers. I'm aware of that, so I'm humbled and have left my arrogance behind. Thanks for being open to psychology and psychiatry. And as I began to think about what to teach, what to talk about, what to share, my flow of thinking about our meetings together for these last, really for the adults, it's a 30-year process. It's about 30 years we've been having these meetings. And because I think we're on the brink of change, I think there's changes ahead, I think I let those thoughts come to the surface. So I'm not teaching emotional skills today, although I will touch on it because it's a part of everything that I do. I will also, I hope this doesn't go on too long. I can't promise that. As Dad would say, if you get finished before I do, raise your hand.
Hey, can you do that on Sunday?
What's that?
Can you not try that on Sunday?
This
works too.
This works.
Yeah, I've tried that one.
I'm going to ask other MKs here if they want to share, because I'm going to be focusing on our MK experience in the last 28 years together. That's what I'm talking about today, and that's what Doug is talking about today. Doug will pick up at 1:30, and I just have to tell you, I've read the drafts of his speech. You have an enormous treat in store. But I'm going to ask other MKs if they want to share after I've shared something about the meaning, the highlights of our time together. I want to approach this historically. I'm going to say what I know about the history. I'm going to approach it psychologically as well as spiritually. My emphasis is on the beauty, the truth, the love, and the humor that we've shared for all these years. In the book, The Candy Bombers, some of you may have read, it's a nonfiction about World War II. The American general is writing a letter back to the American president about the occupation of the quarter of Berlin that they occupied and how difficult it is to, what do they call that, like managing that was. And he said, it is said that there is faith and hope and love, and the greatest of these is a sense of humor. And we have shared tears and humor.
A sense of humor.
A sense of humor, the greatest of these. Did you actually know the quote? Was it Carol? It wasn't? Okay. Our time together began with a waterfall and a lake. The waterfall is called Joren-Taki, and it's on the Izu Peninsula, beyond Sangomatsu, and the lake is called Nojiri. My cousin gave me a fridge magnet a number of years ago, and it said, "I dropped a tear in the lake today, and when they find it, I will stop loving you." That was the subtitle to the talk. I dropped a tear in the lake today, and when they find it, I will stop loving you. Your children of the newly retired young missionaries were having a discussion on Facebook. I think it must have been the SB Japan page, and they were talking about what is this airway meeting? You know, what is this like? And they were talking about, I didn't get the names, I'm very sorry. You have lovely children. They were talking about, you know, having childcare responsibilities and work obligations and how hard it is to get away from the weekend. And we've been hearing that for 30 years from each other. And one of them said, but got really brave and said, but what is it? What do they do? And one of them so wisely answered, they know what it's like to miss Amagi and Noji. That was the answer, and that's where I got the title for this talk. They know, they understand what it means to miss Amagi and Noji. Amagi and Noji were the highlights of our year. Yours too, perhaps. We were together, we played, shouted, swam, hiked, sang, cried, kissed, and learned. The emphasis here is on we. We were in the same boat. We lived in the same intersection of cultures. We mixed up the same languages. We all had to go on that dreaded thing called furlough, and most of us got to come back, but not everybody. Then, at the end of that amazing week, I mean, for which we sewed new clothing and waited with eager anticipation to see each other. Do you remember, like, being on the train from Akane to Shuzenji, and I'd walk the whole thing looking for other NKs? You know, from the beginning, I couldn't sit down until I had walked from the little train, but walked to find who else was on the train, and we'd wait for everybody to get in the bus, and then we'd go up the hill. We were in it together, and we were then in lockstep as we went through high school to be the next ones to be at Haneda walking on the tarmac to the airplane to leave for the States. And we waited with excitement, with terror, and inchoate sadness about leaving everyone we loved. Everything we knew, and the lake and the waterfall. This is just the introduction. Don't get excited. Okay, I chose 3 things to focus on about the NK's 28 years together. The first is that we began by sharing and accepting our differences. Early on, I'll explain. We began by sharing and accepting our differences. Number 2, we discovered that we had landed on this other shore together. That was a miracle. We landed up here, and yet we could come together. And thirdly, we learned we have been students of grief. We have grieved our losses together, boldly, and together, I'm sure. Through memorial service after memorial service, we have cried a lake full of tears. Those are my 3 points. For running. We decided to include our differences. Number 1, I've chosen 3 examples. I'm sure there are many more. The first difference was whether to invite the kids at all. Did you know this? The missionaries had a conflict, which you all actually may have heard more about than we did. They didn't want to invite the kids. And, oh yeah, some wanted to and some didn't. It was a conflict between the 2. And we never heard who was on which side. We all are very circumspect with that sort of thing. They compromised early on by having the MKs invited every other year. And so for years there, it was like, is it an MK year? Is it an MK year? And pretty soon on there, I just started saying, I don't care, I'm going. And that, we all moved in that direction. Being together with our family was just so much more important than somebody's idea that we shouldn't be there. I had no empathy for them. Right now I would. exact year. It was sometime between about 85 and 89. Right in there was the first meeting at Jonathan Creek. I don't have the date yet, and I'd love to know. Surely it was by 88, which would make this the 30th year. So this is either the 30th or the 31st. For me, it was about 8 years after college, after Mom and Dad retired, the Moshiguka group, the Moorheads, Garrett Sharers, and Calcos, the couples, the 8 people, were beginning to meet, and they decided maybe it would be great to include everybody. The story goes that Dottie Lang was jealous that she couldn't come to the Moshiguka meetings, and she and Dad said, let's meet at Jonathan Creek. That was near Dottie Lang's home in Kentucky, right? 45 minutes from Hopkinsville or so. After a year or two, Mom takes credit, and tell me if I'm wrong, for saying that the children need to come. The children need to come. They want to come. She had an ongoing interest in the mission family and the lives of missionary kids. I found she had published an article about the mission family as witnessed in the commission. It was around 1954. And she did a survey of all the denominations, an ecumenical survey of mission. Who did she give the survey to? Maybe the mothers. I'm not sure. I think it might have been the mothers, which was published in the Hayama Conference report, the results of that survey.
And Muir.
What's that?
Muir. John Muir's mother was involved in that research.
Oh, did she do it with
Yeah.
the Muir? That's cool.
That's how I got involved with the other trips.
Thank you. She didn't do that alone. Okay, so I also just want to give her some credit. She was actually the first woman to ever be invited to the Hayama Conference, which had been all male. And she was not invited to the conference. She was invited to speak to the conference because of the survey and what she had to say about mission families. So she came to the hotel and was not invited to meetings. And you all know Thelma well enough to know that she was like hog heaven. She got to stay in a room by herself until she was speaking. That was Thelma. She always said that. I don't want to go, but I want to be invited. that was the thing. I'm sure that with introverts, and they just love me for it. I mean, they think I get it, you know. That was Thelma. So Beth Watson and Ken Bradshaw came in 1990, and Beth remembers this because it was her 40th birthday present from her parents to come. Isn't that sweet? And Ken lived there in Paducah, close to the land between the lakes. And Doug and Mike came, and we remember driving together in 1991 as a family. That was their first year to come, maybe the first year that NKs were officially invited. I had been already, but I'm not sure. And we remember it because as we drove from Nashville to Jonathan Creek, they were doing the Thursday was the confirmation of Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court, and they were going through the vote of all 100 senators as we drove along. Mr. So-and-so, yes. Mr. So-and-so, no. And that was very memorable. They resolved it by having it every other year. The MKs came, and we joined in MK night, which I'll explain. Yes, Michael?
The 91 was my heart attack. That was my first Jonathan Creek meeting.
That was after your heart attack?
Yeah.
You had a heart attack at work.
Yeah.
It was fine.
So that was a nice reunion.
That's beautiful. It's a nice way to remember. It's better than the Clarence Thomas thing. We participate together in MK night, which I'll explain, and then fun night and the memorial service, and then we used to have both Sunday school and church on Sunday. So those 4 events, the MKs got together with everybody. The rest of the time, we were together in our own group sharing. Now, in context here, that's what the adults did. Dad created those first programs in what he called the unprogram, and the missionaries sat. They didn't present, they didn't teach like Japan Connection. They were so erudite. They had all these lectures and classes, and Dad had people at Jonathan Creek sitting in a big circle, and each missionary shared their current lives, what was going on, their current ministries. They shared from their hearts. And that's what they did from 9 to lunch, and then the afternoon was free, and then in the free evenings, that's what they did. So it was a very intimate, and that's what we were doing in what we call, wherever it goes, the boathouse. That's just its name, wherever it gets moved to. So that's what we were doing. In this group, the second difference, so that was the first difference, was whether the kids come or not. The second difference I want to talk about is that early on, was it that first meeting? Douglas arrived with a book by Anne Lamott. I hope you know her. She's a writer, Christian, belongs to St. Andrew's Church in San Rafael, Marin County, California, and she's brilliant and heartful, and one of her first books was called Operating Instructions. Its theme really was about shame and guilt and body and church and not church, and Douglas brought this book and read passages as we talked. And the first thing he gently said to us was, in order to be a group together, we are going to have to accept that we have people who believe and people who don't believe. We have people who are churched, to use the verb, and unchurched. And if we're going to go forward, we need to begin with a baseline of respect for one another. And since that time we have. And it's been beautiful, and we've shared not only our lives and our highlights and our sorrows, but we've also shared our spiritual journeys with one another in great depth during those times of meeting together. So that was the next difference that we had to respect, and what held us together was so much tighter and so much stronger than any difference we might have had. The third difference arose during the flow of the meetings, and this is from my perspective. I haven't met any of you all who particularly agreed with me, haven't disagreed with me either, but somewhere along the way. So MK night, again, Elma takes some credit for this. The MKs got up on Friday nights, y'all, and each one of us in turn got up and talked to you about our lives. What was going on, who we were, where we worked, married kids. We just kept talking. And we each got a certain amount of time, and that's what Friday night was about in the old days. Our parents wanted to know us. They wanted to know the kids. And it was during that night, as the MKs are learning to accept our differences and connect with one another outside of John and Creek, that Janet stood up, I thought, extraordinarily courageously, and spoke. There were 75 people there that day, that evening, and she said, you know, I've been talking to your kids on the phone sometimes late into the night, and everything isn't roses. Everything isn't easy peasy. Everything isn't Sunshine Street. There's trouble. There's trouble. There's trouble. And she did not judge anybody. She did not attack anybody. She did not call them names. She didn't tell any stories. She just brought into our depths the truth that this living thing is hard, and some of us were doing better than others. And I think this was really an outgrowth of the compassion that we were learning for one another. We were feeling very compassionate towards this missionary kid task, this endeavor of growing up in another country and then plopping on this other shore with very little knowledge of what was going on and a lot of expectations that we do well. The next year, I thought it was a really pivotal and important moment. I asked Janet's permission to share my memory of that. The next year, 1 year later, Howard Hayes arrives, and I think he had heard about this from some folks, and that was fine. Was Howard? No, that was Jonathan Creek still, Howard Redmond. He stood up and reminded us that our parents were the most talented, committed, wise, wonderful people that you could ever meet on the face of the earth. And that our upbringing had been privileged beyond all measure. And of course that was true too. So here we have these differences. There's the trouble and the struggle and those people who've fallen off and come back, and then there's the incredible, dazzling beauty of the life that we were given. And that's a difference that we carry within us all the time, each and every day, both sides. That's the difference. That's the third difference I wanted to speak to. Okay, point 2, we have shared our stories with one another. We've always been sharing about how much we missed our home in Japan, how much we hated furloughs, how much we were frequently freaked out by coming to the States for college or leaving college for adult life. That was a tough transition for me. School I got, but going from school to adult right in there was very challenging with mom and dad 10,000 miles away. My Southern family and their racism freaked me out. I just couldn't even believe it. And maybe you also experienced it, and we've shared all this, their utter disinterest in where we had been or what we had done. Oh yeah, I just came from going around the world. Nice, hi, here's the chicken. You know, I was really kind of just sitting there. We've all experienced that, haven't we? Just a little bit of it's not in their box. You know, it's just not there. We shared, you know, many iterations of what it was like to stand up in a Baptist church in the South after your fathers preached on missions and have to shake hands for 30 minutes. Doug and Mike and I got really wicked one night. We actually started cussing in Japanese. We couldn't have been anywhere near mom and dad because they knew those words. Far down the sideline. I didn't know I was going to say that. Douglas pointed out that some people actually noticed that our clothes were frayed, and they felt sorry for us, but I never tuned into that part. I always kind of felt like the cat's pajamas, you know. But these had really been noticed. We had like frayed clothing. It was Joel Bradshaw, our distinguished linguist and anthropologist, recently retired from the University of Hawaii, who attended Jay Creek and I think was the first person who said, yes, this is our tribe. This is our tribe. It's a very strange, smallish tribe. But I will say that I found enormous comfort, and I highly recommend this author. Her name is Elaine Neal Orr. Her parents were Southern Baptist missionaries in Nigeria. She's now on the English faculty at North Carolina State University and is writing her 4th book. She's a good writer. Her first one is a memoir growing up as a Southern Baptist MK in Nigeria called The Gods of Noonday. All of her books are completely mission themed. Her first novel was about missionaries in Africa in the late 1800s, I believe. Swimming Between the Worlds is her current novel, and it takes place, I think I haven't read it yet, on a missionary furlough in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I mean, she's our people, folks. The Neals were medical missionaries in Nigeria. I mean, they got to have wars, Beth. I mean, they had people, you know, shooting guns over the compound. They had a very exciting life, and they actually had to leave the field to come to America at 16. They didn't have junior and senior year in Nigeria. She spoke about 3 things that just completely struck a bell with me, and I realized maybe all of us in case share this experience. 3 things stuck out. Our parents were not all they were cracked up to be. Didn't laugh very loud. 2, we all called, what y'all called the mission field, we called home. That was true of the, you know, Southern Baptists in every other country, actually all missionary kids. And number 3, we hated coming to America. Just hated it, absolutely hated it, as did they. So that was lovely. Elaine Neal's sister, I won't go into all that. Her mother was my mother's big sister at Winthrop College, and they were next door neighbors to Bob and Kay Culpepper in retirement in Wake Forest. So they're close in, and Elaine is a great writer. Happy to share those titles with you if you're interested. Number 3, we're getting to the end here. This is the last one. I did great, Doug. It's only 11. That means that Michael's going to the football game, and you all get to talk. Are you happy about that? Are you happy about that? Okay. Number 3, we shared our grief. each Saturday, as we do now, except this time it's on Sunday. We join together in a memorial service for those who have passed away, our mothers, our fathers, our uncles, our aunts, our children, our spouses. We shared our grief. Do you remember, like 25 years ago, there was a bunch of jokes. They were sort of Southern Baptist jokes about church life. And one of them, I don't know why I remembered it, it was, you're not really dead till you're dead in a bulletin. Very good. Well, for me, it became, and maybe I remembered it because it felt like for me, and I think for many of us, that we hadn't grieved our parents until we did it together at Garroway, because we're with the people who loved them with us. And of course, I haven't gone into the fact that part of our closeness with each other is that we adore each other's parents. It's part of the bond that we share, is how much we know and love each other's parents. We've shared our grief. We cried so much. These memorial services used to start at 9, and sometimes we would eat lunch and come back to finish them, y'all. We have an hour and a half Sunday morning. I really don't even know who passed away this year. Perhaps why. I learned yesterday. We did this for many, many hours, and we would come away from that as well as from our own talks, open-hearted, blurry-eyed, unfocused, tired, but full of joy and intimacy and closeness. And we think it might have been Ken Bradshaw, who coined the term creekhead for how we felt after Johnny Creek. Just kind of high, kind of tired, and full of joy. It was an online discussion, again on Facebook, about and this is a page called Liberal Missionary Kids. It's really fun. They're missionary kids from all denominations and from all around the world. It's quite an experience. And in that, somebody was complaining about that kind of knee-jerk Protestant. It may not just be Protestant. It may be, I don't know, it may be universal. When you're sad, to say, oh, you'll get over it. It'll get better. When God closes a door, he opens another one. They're perfectly happy in heaven, gone through a loss. We have these ways of shutting down our own grief and other people's grief. It's like when someone comes to you with sorrow, often I think we say, oh, when God closes one door, he opens another, because we don't want to feel our own sympathy. It was Cheryl who said on this discussion page on Facebook, it takes courage to grieve. And I, of course, at the time said, I totally agree with you. It takes courage to grieve. On that page, another missionary kid pointed out that the New Testament is full of references to the power and the importance of grieving. She just rattled them off. They included Jesus as a man of sorrows. Jesus is the man of sorrows. Jesus wept. Blessed are those who mourn. And then the older, and there may be more, and the older one was a time to laugh and a time to weep. So Christianity is not something that inherently is opposed to experiencing pain and the pain of sorrow. Why am I talking about this? In psychology, the capacity to feel sadness is the most important human skill and the height of emotional intelligence. I'll explain. I don't mean going to bed for a week or a month in agony and self-deprecation. I'm not talking about depression right here. And if you give me another hour, I'll explain the difference between grieving and depression. And I don't mean to shed a few tears either. What I'm talking about when I talk about grieving is the capacity to sit with the pain inside of your own body. It hurts. It absolutely hurts. And that hurt of loss is hard to bear. And we almost want to do everything we can to get away from it. It's hard to learn its lessons. But to hurt until the hurt resolves, to feel the hurt until it resolves, leads to enormous grace and blessing. If one avoids grief, one avoids emotion. If one, I just smiled like Jim. If one avoids, I just made her now. Been with her for 24 hours, 36 now. If one avoids emotion, one avoids life. If you avoid life, you cannot effectively problem solve and move forward. So what do I mean by that? Emotions are what bind us together. Have you ever noticed they're really and truly the great glue between us? If you study your emotions, they are almost always interpersonal. I could be grieving the loss of a job, but it would be between me and the people of the job. They feel, I'm angry at someone, I feel guilty about something I did to someone, I feel shame about what they might think about me, I'm sad because I lost them, or a canine or a cat, I suppose. I don't mean just humans. They feel like the glue between us. Sadness, anger, guilt, shame. I'm going to say a little bit more. But on the other hand, our emotions are messages to ourselves. Our emotions hold information that we need to know who we are. I'll give you some examples. This comes from the evolutionary psychologist. So if you don't believe in evolution, you could go to sleep now. You could take a nap. Guilt functions to let us know when we might or have transgressed our own values. Guilt is about transgressing your own value system. It's this little hurting dog. When you get near telling a lie, it starts to hurt. If you've even inadvertently stood somebody out for lunch, you feel guilty because it's in your value system to have been there and been on time. You see what I mean? Guilt functions to let us know what our values are and when we've transgressed them. Shame is there to let us know when we've transgressed social norms. You feel shame when you feel that your community will ostracize you or reject you. And evolutionarily, that meant death. Now, as it turns out, in sort of modern life, you can live alone. But in our human history, you couldn't do that. Without the tribe, without the group, without the village, you could not survive the winter. You couldn't do it by yourself. Anger tells you that some goal of yours has been blocked. I sometimes don't know I had a goal until I get angry and it's blocked. And then I have to ask myself, what was my goal? Like you think that you're angry at the person who's mowing the lawn on Sunday when you're sitting there quietly in the early morning. Actually, it's because you had a goal of sitting peacefully and it was blocked. If you didn't have the goal of sitting peacefully, the lawnmower's not going to bother you in the least. And sadness has functions in our lives. So, again, according to the evolutionary psychologists, the functions of sadness are to let us know the value of what we've lost. Think if somebody died and you didn't feel anything. You'd be like, do I really care? Like, what's going on here? This is really strange. I don't feel sad. It teaches us, it tells us about the value of what we've lost. It creates an impetus to reconnect so that you don't have to feel sad anymore. We reconnect, we find new people to be connected to. And finally, and I just read this, studying for this paper of this talk, sadness, according to them, gives us strength to do hard things that happiness does not. Happiness, kind of happy to let things be happy. And when we're sad, we may have the strength to make difficult changes, to reach out when we don't feel like it, to reconnect with people because we know we can reconnect, but maybe not exactly because we feel like it right that minute. But sadness gives us the strength to solve difficult problems. The capacity that we've shared together here for 30 years to feel sadness until it goes down on its own is a miracle. And as many of you have experienced, this miracle, this something that happens on the other end is akin to awe. We were in that awe at Dad's funeral, for example, and we were in the awe of life. We've been here in awe together. It gives us an appreciation for and a reverence for living. It gives us a reverence for the present moment. If God is love, it gives us a reverence for God in this moment of grieving. It gives us gratitude for the life that we have, for the blessings that we have, for the connections that we have, and for the love that we experience and the love that we can share. So that, for me, is the miracle of following sadness to its other side. In Chinese medicine, the meridian for grief is the same as the meridian for awe. You know that feeling sometimes you get when you cry and then suddenly the world looks new and beautiful. We've shared that together so many times. We've gotten so good at it. And thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts. Where I'd like to go, I know that was a little heavy there towards the end. What I'd like to do is invite any of you really, and what I'd like you to speak to. You can stand up right now. We need to use the mic. It's the ear thing. The people who need help with the hearing. The meaning of these meetings, the highlights of the meetings, what they mean for you, what they've meant to you. So I'm actually going to come to the side. Is there somebody who is willing to come and share? Cheryl, please, thank you.
Cheryl, before you get started.
Yeah.
The other side of the coin is happiness, joy, celebration.
Yes.
It's not always depression, accomplishment, sharing. You know, like the getting together doesn't have to always be funerals.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say,
Okay, well,
because I was going to
well,
say.
anyway, Nebraska should be playing.
Okay, you can go play.
No,
Is that right? What I was going to say, because what I noticed about MK group
You never
is
know.
that we went in these kind
It's
of
like
waves,
Michigan State.
and
Yeah.
we went through anger, grief, and then all of a sudden we were rolling on the floor laughing with each other, and that's why the MK night became fun night. Because instead of coming, sharing our pain, sharing our grief, we started doing little silly skits, some of which the missionaries didn't quite understand. But so I think that's how it segued into missionary night, to fun night. But so we kind of do a combination of everything. We, of course, all have grief going on a regular basis. And so we grieve still, and scream and yell and cry, and then laugh.
For me, coming here was a gift from my parents, so that made it a special event. But when I'm here, I don't have to explain myself. So I love that part. I had an experience, you learn lessons in life, frankly, but I learned early in my marriage. When somebody asked me, where are you from? I would say, my husband's from Louisville, Kentucky. And that worked for 45 years, except the one exception. I was at some kind of function, must have been church related or something, and this very tall man standing, it was a social time, he says, so where are you from? So I answered the question, as always, to keep from having to spend the next 30 minutes explaining why my parents are not Japanese. So I told him my husband's from Louisville, Kentucky, and he turned and said, that is not what I asked. I felt like this was W reincarnated. He just showed up at it. That was all what I asked. So I had to explain. But when I'm here, I don't explain myself. And at our church about 4 years ago, I took that TCK book that Ruth Van Rieken explained to us at Johnson Creek many years ago. And so I was sharing that. And my church folks were like, like deer headlight thing going on, because I look like somebody they should figure out, and they have since learned, But one morning, getting ready to go to Sunday school, I go up the stairs, and there's this man standing by one of the doors, and without a nanosecond of thought, I said, and that's what happens to me when I'm tired. Charles knows. I break out of Japanese, English is gone. It's totally gone. When Dad died in the hospital, the last 2 weeks or so, he understood absolutely no English. So Mother or I had to be with him at all times. He wouldn't sit up or roll over or let the nurse do whatever. He would resist, but if you would tell him in Japanese, Daijoubu, kamo san desu yo. And then he would be fine. He would understand. So Mother and I had to be with him. But Mother had been reading the Bible to him, and it got so that and it had been in English. Then when his English disappeared, then Mother would be reading the Bible, and he just fidget and fidget and fidget. So she brought her Japanese Bible and started reading it to him. He just calm, blessed face. So from then on, she and I had to read out of the Japanese Bible for his sake. But not explaining myself is a delight, and I don't get this when I come here, because when I'm with all the other Americans, but Charles and I just realized recently we both married foreigners.
I didn't prepare this at all, so I'll try not to ramble. A couple of weeks ago, Dad and I enrolled at Carson College to audit Sermon on the Mount. And it's an excellent course. In the process of that, I found our relationship, Dad and me, we actually resolved a lot of things. And also, I used to think being a foreigner, which I'm still a foreigner, was a curse. Because I couldn't relate to other people, I couldn't relate to my parents. And during the course of going over the Beatitudes, what we're looking at, one of the things is, one, you have to love yourself, which is a difficult concept. The teacher went into the history of the Bible and who's speaking and all this criteria of translation. Sorry, I'm nervous. Anyway, the amazing thing was that I found that in fact being a curse is a blessing, because I can translate like a fool. I can translate any situation. I get the concept, the overall big picture. And so that was a really special moment, is taking that class with Dad, because he and I are so much closer, and it's turned into a blessing.
So one of my favorite, I'm Janet, by the way, for those of y'all that don't know me. I'm Ralph's daughter, the youngest and most favorite. Nancy said earlier. She's lying.
Lauren's asking you to speak into the
Okay, I'm sorry, I hate microphones because I have a really loud voice because I was a cheerleader. For those of y'all that don't know that. Anyway, there's so many stories that could be told from this. I mean, so many. But the two that and I said to Margaret, I said, I'm just going to let it happen and see whatever comes to mind for me. So the two that came to mind are about my children. So this is not just a group of people here that are impacted by each other. Our children are also impacted by this process and this group of people. And my children feel like they're an extension of you all. They do. And now the grandchildren do because they got to visit Japan last year, and it was wonderful. Anyway, the two things that I remember specifically about the gathering of Jonathan Creek and possibly here at Garaway, I'm not sure in terms of timing, get confused by the two, but one was when my son Will was born, and he was one of the first children that I brought because he was still an infant. And I brought him to Jonathan Creek just for the day because that was when we lived in Nashville. So at that point I had 3 children, and Will was the youngest, and I had a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, so I couldn't stay for the whole weekend. My poor husband would have probably killed me. But I was able to come up for the weekend with Will and bring him for just that for that Saturday. So, you know, my children have been experiencing that we are doing this year-round. Every single year we get together, and it impacts them. It's amazing how it affects them. But the second story I want to tell you about is about my son Trey, who's the youngest. He currently is 23, and when he was in 4th grade, I went back to work. And me going back to work created a severe anxiety in him, severe. And so I started working September the 1st, telling my new boss that there is a weekend that I already had planned in October that I cannot come to work. It's already planned out, no problems, whatever. And when the weekend was coming up and all my kids are older, and I was thinking the 4 children could stay with their father, and Trey started having severe anxiety, severe, to the point where he wouldn't let me leave him. And so I said, okay, well, you can come with me. And so he came, he was 4th grade. And so another thing that we didn't talk about, there's so many things about this whole process. We used to play volleyball every Saturday. And we would go home with bruises all up and down because we only played once a year, except for Doug, played all the time. And so we would leave, I literally would go home with bruises up and down my arms. I remember Joanna, like her whole blew all over because we were out there fighting to compete with each other. We were going to win, you know. And so we were willing to sacrifice our bodies, and then we were able to at that moment because we were a lot younger. But Trey came and he enjoyed so much playing with us, and I think it might have been the same year that Jordan was here. I'm not sure. Could be. And but the significant event that weekend was that Doug was observing Trey the entire 4 days. And at the end of the weekend, he came up to me and he said, "Did you know that your son has a tick?" And I said, "I had no idea." And he said, "You need to see a neurologist." And that went into the spurring of getting Trey help that I would have never known had he not come here. And it was a significant event in our life because it was a significant, extremely significant event in his life and how his life was going to be later. And so we went back home immediately, got a neurologist, started getting diagnoses. And I mean, that was, for Trey, if you knew him, you would love him. I mean, he's one of those kids that's infectious. He can't not, he immediately knows you. He knows no stranger. He is automatically your friend. He knows who you are. He knows your name. He is just a magnificent child. And if you talk to Daddy, Cheryl, Stuart, Nancy, anyone, they will say the same thing about him. But he had to go through that anxiety panic attack, thought he was dying, all of those things in his childhood to make him who he is today. And I really know that Doug's diagnosis was a significant event in our life that I remember because of this meeting. So those are my two stories.
Was that two?
And then Will, my children. I have a lot more stories. I can talk all that, but Margaret.
You know, we have lots of time.
Okay, I'm done now. I love that.
Somebody else?
Well, we still got time, maybe some of the missionaries would like to share. Let me share this. This year, last year, our daughter and her husband was in membership to the same church we were with, go First Baptist Council. And I was asked back in the spring to spend 3 Sunday nights talking about missions. And I was talking to my daughter, and they live there a bunch of two.
You got to use the microphone.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I talked to my daughter, and I said, I'd like to, I'm only talking about missions, our life in Japan and all, and, you know, Southern Baptist missions and all this. And I said, I would like to interview you in the thing. And she said, well, just, you know, give me some questions ahead of time and things. So I said, okay. And what was amazing was she began to talk, answer the question. I'd ask the question, and she began to talk. And then we had a Q&A with the, you know, with the church members, and it was amazing, you know, the questions that they would ask her, and you know, things that she answered, and you know, some things that you know, we felt like she adjusted well, and you know, she was still some of the fears that she had, you know, being not at home, you know, like this. But also some of the things that you MKs experience, we experience as well. You know, the thing. I remember, I don't know who was that told me this. He said, when you come back, you know, you come back to America and you're excited about your work, and after 1 or 2 minutes, this glaze come over. You might as well shut up. You know, they want to know where the chicken is. But it is, you know, getting together like this, it's all, for us, you know, we don't have to explain ourselves. You know, why we do, you know, some of the weird things. I was coming back. I didn't realize the culture shock that I was going to experience myself. You know, we knew Japan was going to be different, and you know, when we got there. But coming back, I didn't know. And what's been good for me for the past 5 years, it's been going on for about 35 or 40 years. A group of men from First Baptist, these are all key leaders in the church. They have a prayer breakfast every Tuesday morning in a local restaurant, and so. All of them were engineers, except me and a veterinarian. You know, I wanted to know, you know, why they asked me to join the group. And what I found out very quickly, the first day, all of these guys had spent some time in Japan. You know, a lot of them, you know, worked, you know, they were, most of them worked with NASA or worked with different defense contractors and all. So they'd been in Japan generally for a week or two, but things that they had experienced, they didn't, you know, it's real, this normally happens there, you know, and so that's part of the reason they gave, but they've helped me, you know, get used to get back, you know, in America, and so, some of you are adults. He didn't marry another MK, but he married a girl whose parents immigrated from Sweden. You know, she was born in America, but her 2 sisters were born in Sweden. So We got lots of questions.
Funny story. Let me go again. I just thought of a funny story that really typifies the experience that some of us had as far as being like a foreigner. So in 1970, by the way, I'm Paula Heiss, I'm Donna and Joyce Heiss' daughter. Anyway, I should have said that first time. So in 1971, I graduated from high school and flew alone from Tokyo to Shawnee, Oklahoma. Shawnee is next to Pink and Corn. That's how little they are. You can probably see them on the map. Anyway, I went to Oklahoma Baptist University. It was my freshman year. And so what the university did was they had families, you know, have the MKs in their home. You might have experienced some of this, and they would have a meal and everything. So my first real experience with how I was going to be perceived was based on this meal, this family. One of the uncles came in, again, from Oklahoma, rural, overalls, freshly pressed. I mean, they were really trying to, you know, do a nice thing for us. Anyway, so he wanted to, the guy in overalls wanted to have a conversation. And he said, Japan, is that where those Budapest are from?